Okay, these are your notes for calculating wave speed, wavelength, and wave frequency. Okay, so this is our main formula. Our wave speed is going to equal our wavelength times our frequency. The symbol for our wavelength is this symbol right here. V stands for velocity for our speed, and F stands for frequency. This is one of those formula triangles, so velocity, wavelength, and frequency. We're just going to review our symbols. So V equals the wave speed. Our units are meters per second. Our symbols are M divided by our S. This is our symbol for our wavelength. The units are meters. That's with just our M. And the F is for our frequency. That's in hertz. Symbol is Hz. So hertz is basically just how many cycles per second. Okay, so remember the frequency is the number of waves passing a point at a given number of time. So if we have 10 waves pass in 1 second, that frequency is 10 hertz. If we have 6 waves pass in 2 seconds, that frequency is 3 hertz. So when we do these problems, we need to use all 5 of our steps. The first thing we need to do is underline our question. Then we're going to write out our variables. We'll write the formula without the numbers. Then we're going to solve the problem and check for sig figs. Okay, so our first one, sample problem 1. A wave has a frequency of 50 hertz and a wavelength of 10 meters. What is the speed of the wave? So that's what we're looking for. That's step 1. Step 2, write down our variables. So our speed or velocity we don't know. Our wavelength is 10 meters. And our frequency is 50 hertz. So then our third step, write down our formula without any numbers. So our velocity or speed of the wave equals our wavelength times our frequency. So then we're just going to plug these numbers in. So our speed equals our wavelength, which is 10 meters, times our frequency, which is 50 hertz. Okay, we put that into our calculator. If you need to, you might not need to. And you're going to end up with 500 meters per second. Okay, and then this is one of those where we need to check our sig figs. So we have 1 sig fig here and 1 sig fig here. We have 1 sig fig here. So this is our final answer. Our second sample problem. So a wave has a frequency of 5 hertz and a speed of 25 meters per second. What is the wavelength? Okay, so now we're going to look at our formula triangle, which is our velocity over our wavelength and frequency. Okay, so we want to find the wavelength. So we don't know what that is. We have a frequency of 5 hertz, and we have a speed or velocity of 25 meters per second. If we look at our triangle, the best thing we can do to figure this out is if we just put our finger over our wavelength, we're left with our velocity or speed divided by our frequency. And so that's the formula we're going to use. Our wavelength equals our velocity over our frequency. And so then we could just take these numbers and plug them in. So our velocity is our 25 meters per second, and our frequency is our 5 hertz. Okay, so then when we take our 25 divided by our 5, our wavelength, we end up getting 5 meters. Okay, then we got to check our sig figs. We have 1 sig fig here, and so we need 1 sig fig for our answer. It all works out. Okay, and then our third problem. What is a wavelength? A wave has a wavelength of 10 meters and a speed of 340 meters per second. What is the frequency? So underline it. So the next thing we need to do, we need to find our variables. So we're looking for a frequency. We're going to write that first. We have a wavelength of 10 meters, and we have a velocity of 340 meters per second. So now we need to figure out the formula. We can go look at our triangle again. Since we're looking for our frequency, we can cover that up. And frequency is going to equal our velocity divided by our wavelength. So our frequency, equals our velocity divided by our wavelength. Then we just plug our numbers in. Our velocity is 340 meters per second. Our wavelength is 10 meters per second, or 10 meters, excuse me. So then we just take our 340 divided by our 10. So our frequency is going to be 34 hertz. Okay, then we need to check for sig figs. We have 1 sig fig here, we have 2 here, so our answer needs 2 sig figs. Since this is a 4, that's going to stay at a 3, and so our final answer would be 30 hertz. Okay, so now that we've gone through the 3 different types of problems, you can use that to answer the rest of the problems on your worksheet. Make sure that you are using at the front, make sure you're using all 5 of those steps to solve each and every problem.